How's it going, folks? I'm Matthew, this is Lemora's Cards, and today I'm going to be breaking down the top 10 cEDH cards of 2023. That's right, I know a million sets released, more product than anyone could ever need, but we're at the end of it for this year. No more sets scheduled for this year unless they drop some little secret thing on us. So we're going to be taking a look at cards released this year and breaking down some of the best ones that had the most impact. It wasn't easy. There were a couple slots I was pretty sure about, and there were some that are really tough. And of course, some of these cards are newer than others, and it remains to be seen how they're going to prove themselves, but I did my best. And I'm pretty happy with the list I put together. Let me know down below, what is your top 10 cards for cEDH this year? Pretty big year, I think we can all agree, with a lot of shakeups. If you enjoyed this video, consider liking, commenting, subscribing. Consider supporting me on Patreon. Thank you to all my amazing patrons over there who get access to early videos, get to submit questions for the podcast to be featured, and get to submit decks to be featured on the top 16. Make sure to get on that if you want to show your deck off. With all that being said, let's hop into it. Looking to run a great cEDH event? Having hosted over 100 successful tournaments, Eminence Gaming has your back with Command Tower. With its intuitive tournament manager dashboard, you can handle everything from deck list submission to player management in just a few clicks. Then, all players need to do is scan a generated QR code to have access to your full tournament bracket. Put your players first with seamless pairing software and real-time access to standings. Take the guesswork out of tournaments. Give Command Tower a try for your next event. All right, before we get into the top 10, of course, we have some honorable mentions. So there were a lot of cards that are really good. Some not quite as proven yet. There are things like Charismatic Conqueror, which are just a total mess and maybe just might be banned because they're broken in multiplayer. Not necessarily for power level, but for other reasons. And Kitesail Larcenist is one I kind of have high expectations for going forward, but we'll see how that one goes. But my three official honorable mentions are Invasion of Ikoria, which is a pretty powerful tutor in decks that can use it. It is worse than Finale of Devastation, like we all knew, but it is still definitely able to get the job done in a lot of cases. Tyvar, Jubilant Brawler, one that I begrudgingly didn't put on the 10. I think power level wise, it probably makes it in the top 10, but just the archetypes that it's for and the decks it's for, like it's cracked in Sisei, but you just don't see it that much in other lists. I definitely think this is one that like this time next year, you might have like in the middle of this list in terms of the best cards, because I mean it really is just super powerful. And then Obnixilis, I mean this is just a powerful commander. It doesn't really show up in the 99, but it has been doing well. It has been doing more work recently with some top 16 and top 4 results. One to keep your eyes on, and again definitely a card that as we go into next year could end up seeming like maybe it should have been higher on this list. All right, let's take a look at our number 10, and that is Flesh Duplicate. I've talked about this card a lot. It's not that new and exciting, but this is definitely been a big upgrade for a lot of decks. There are some decks that are just jamming every clone that they can, basically. Flesh Duplicate, Imposter Mech, Fimage, Phyrexian Metamorph. This one has been great for the whole Breaker Horror and Tidespout Tyrant decks like Kinnan that get access to new combos that you couldn't do with Fimage. Yeah, this has just been a really, really great option. Some other cards that are going to be on this list have definitely made this a better option than Phantasmal. I mentioned, I'll just leave that at that. Next at number 9, we've got Talion, Kindly Lord. One of the few cards that's come out this year that's both a powerful commander and is showing up in the 99. Lists are still getting developed as to whether they want to run Talion in the 99. Talion has had some success already as a cEDH commander, so that's been interesting to see. It kind of spearheaded the whole Control Winter movement, but it's really hard to underrate the power level that Talion has when it comes into play. The pressure on life totals, the card draw power, it does a lot. It does it very well. It's just one of those cards that, the 2 pips and 4 mana, that's a little bit to cast, and there are more decks now thinking about maybe cutting Nas and, going up on this and other expensive draw engines that we'll get to. But yeah, Talion has definitely been a powerful card and one you're going to have to be thinking about in cEDH deck lists, I imagine, for a while to come. Number 8 is the newest card that's on this list, and as such, it's not quite proven itself yet, but I think Dauntless Dismantler is going to be a card that you see a lot of going forward. Similar cards like Blind Obedience have already seen like a big uptick, and this card does what that does for the most part, the more relevant part with making artifacts come in tap, but also being a 1/4 human. It's such a perfect blue farm card. It's so annoying. They can't keep getting away with it, but even decks like Tivit, any sort of Dockside combo deck is going to love this kind of thing. I think it's maybe not quite to that level, but it's almost like a Drannith Magistrate level of splashable hate that you can just throw on your deck. And then the ability to destroy artifacts is actually pretty impactful too. So I think stacks decks, mid-range decks, maybe not turbo decks, but like lots of decks I think will be seeing this card. And it's one you're going to expect a lot of. And that 1/4 body is just perfect. Number 7, maybe this comes lower than people might have expected based on the hype for it when it released, but that is Beseech the Mirror. This is a card that I think people have come down on slightly. It's seeming like it isn't just the perfect fit in any high color deck. It is very powerful. Sometimes it's the best tutor in your deck, sometimes it's not, but it is definitely a card you have to be considerate of in cEDH. You will see it, especially in like the Grixis, Mardu, you know, 3 or less color decks. That 3 black pips isn't quite as bad, but there is a cost to it. You know, you were not seeing it show up in a lot of blue farm decks. Where it shakes out, I think over the course of next year, we'll kind of get to see what decks really want it and what decks don't. Once people have a lot of reps with the card, it's still relatively new, but it's definitely a powerful option. And there are a lot of decks that I think will never cut this card in their entire history of existing, basically. It is very powerful. At number 6, the commander that didn't, I mean, this had to be one of the sleeper hits of the set. I mean, this is one Eric and I were high on, but like Atraxa Grand Unifier has been a deck I've heard described as like, people say, I don't know why this deck is good, but it keeps performing. And that is the case every tournament. Like almost every single tournament, it's top 16. It just continually shows up. This big mana payoff for your dorky Timna Thrasios color list. It's hard to undersell it. You know, it's the food chain deck of the format right now. And yeah, it just continually shows up with these colors that were, you know, sort of written off. Do I know exactly why it's still good? Not entirely. I do think, you know, having a big mana payoff into the mid to late game, then also just a combo outlet and get you a ton of cards and is great with your clone effects. Like there's a lot that Atraxa does. It's just expensive to get there, but you know, you're a deck that's slowing the game down and, you know, trying to draw cards and make a bunch of mana like so many other mid-range decks. And this one has just worked really well. It isn't one that we see in the 99 of any list, so maybe you could dock it a few points, maybe put it below Beseech or Dauntless Dismantler. I could see putting it a lot of different places at this list, maybe not any higher, but it definitely, I think, deserves this top 10 status because this is a commander that, unless some things change, I kind of expect to keep seeing this, you know, really high up next year. Now we're looking at the top half. Number 5, Lotho Corrupt Shiriff. Don't feed the Shiriff. Maybe lower than some expected, maybe higher than others, but this is just like kind of done all the things I expected it to. It's amazing at fixing your mana, at generating mana, comes down, it's a decent Timna attacker at 2/1. We see it pretty much show up in all of the higher color decks that can run it. I mean, all the Tivits and Blue Farms and most of the Nagilas and the Kinriths. I mean, they love this card. It's been great in Sisay. Like, it really, if you can run it, it's just a card that I think you will run and probably will be running for a while unless we see a lot of power creep sometime soon. I don't see this card going anywhere. It maybe isn't like the slam dunk, this is what makes my deck work card, but it's another one of those cards that just smooths out everything that you do and can just lead to, you know, this snowballing effect of generating mana that is, you know, so good in cEDH. Number 4, 5-4-3 were pretty tough for me. Then number 4, I got Agatha Soul Cauldron. This card just keeps getting better and better. It's been probably the best card ever printed for Sisay, even making it in like Kinrith list. And it's a big part of why, like, card that didn't get featured here, Francisco, has, you know, got some talk because of what that can do with Walking Ballista. This card just has so much play to it. Incidental graveyard hate, mana fixing, being able to, you know, turn all your random dudes into dorks, be able to turn all your dudes into ranger captains. Like, there's so much that this card does at 2 colorless mana. It can go in any deck, period. I think this is one that's here to stay, and it's one that's just going to get better. This card will get more combos. There's always going to be some kind of graveyard shenanigans going on with, you know, a format where Underworld Breach is illegal. Like, there's so much that this card does. You know, you definitely can't undersell the power of it. Maybe it could go higher. Let me know if you think so. Maybe it should be lower, but I definitely think it belongs somewhere in the top middle-ish of this list because it's been such a big card. Now, this one you might not agree with. I don't know. But for me, number 3 is Borne Upon a Wind. This card is busted. It has invigorated Necropotence so much. This is the best thing you can do with Necropotence now. It's made decks reevaluate whether they want to run Necro. Decks that aren't even running Necro are choosing to run it just because of the ability to sandbag win attempts or, you know, instep do a dockside, you know, being able to breach everything at instant speed is basically unstoppable. Don't care about your Beseech, your Auto Wars, even your Silence. I'll just win on top of it. Oh, Ranger Captain activation? Boom, who cares? Win attempt. This card allows you to do so much much, and it cantrips, and it's blue. You can pitch it to Force of Will. It's just crazy. If you haven't played with this card, if you haven't got to do especially the Necro Born Upon a Win thing, really wild. And then having this many payoffs. I mean, we've seen decks now go up to, you know, Final Fortune, Born Upon a Win, and Crop Rotation for Emergent Zone, like all these different payoffs for Necropotence, really pushing that card. Arguably, Necropotence is like the best win con of a lot of what would previously be called Turbo Nos decks. And part of that is because of the power level of this card. It's really hard to undervalue. And I think maybe you could argue Agatha's goes above it. Born Upon a Win, I think you could argue for in every single blue deck in the format. And I don't think that's an exaggeration. At number 2, I think 1 and 2, you guys probably knew what it was. What they would be, but the order, you know, could be some argument. But for me, I think number 2 is the One Ring. One of the most powerful draw engines we've ever seen. It's colorless. It can go in every deck. It has a really actually impactful ETB. It seemed like that would mainly be a thing in 1v1 Magic or, you know, casual Commander, but it's really been impactful against decks. There are so many decks that win with like Finale of Devastation decks like Kinnan. This stops people from being able to brain freeze you and, you know, mill your library. It stops people from being able to do Tymna draws and Yuriko triggers off of you and Najeela win attempts. Like, it does so much just off of that. And then plus it's drawing cards every turn. Like, it's made Seedborn Muse even better. It's made Manamo like a cEDH card. It has single-handedly made Thada Adele a playable commander that has had results. Like, this has been a crazy impactful card. Not every deck is choosing to run it, but it has even made decks think about whether they want to run ad nauseum, because there's cards like this in Talion and Beseech the Mirror that have had such a big impact, you know, at kind of higher mana values. Maybe we don't run Nas because, you know, we don't even really care to do that much anyways, and we just become a card draw deck basically, like we already were. So easy to cast is another big thing about it, and it's just been impactful every format it's legal in. Just a hugely impactful card that's hard to undervalue. But I don't think it's quite number 1, and I imagine you know what number 1 is, and that for me is Orcish Bowmasters. Orcish Bowmasters should probably see play in every single black deck for the rest of cEDH's existence. This card just warps the game around it. In this format, it's very Ristic, Mystic, Tymna, even now One Ring, very defined by those cards. And 2 mana flash, you just, boom, I just changed the game. Oh, you cast the Wheel of Fortune? Oh, that, I won the game. Borderline like a Hull Breacher effect, you know, not quite that broken, but it's given decks like Rogsai or, you know, any other sort of like turbo wheel kind of deck, like an actual combat win con that's very realistic to do. If you play this card, at some point you are going to win purely off of the damage and the orc token killing people. It lets you really take over the board. It's in one way made removal less necessary because Bowmasters is some of the best removal in the format, but in another way you need to be able to get rid of Bowmasters, and of course the best way to do that is your own Bowmasters. So it's this really compounding, borderline homogenizing effect, but I think has not been a negative. I don't think any card here has been a negative for the format. I think Bowmasters, while arguably it does punish creature decks more, I don't think it's that green decks necessarily get overly punished, because again, like the Tymna style decks, they're drawing cards with their little creatures, they get punished for it. Like, it really punishes everything other than decks that aren't too heavy on the creatures, but then usually pressuring their life total is relevant too. So I think people were scared this is like a Hull Breacher or Dockside situation when it was revealed. I don't think it's quite that level, but it's just under that and is very impactful in this format. And I think for that reason and a whole bunch of others, it is my number 1 cEDH card for 2023. Let me know down below if you agree with this list. What is your top 10 cards? What were some that you were hoping to see here and you didn't? And what are some card designs, you know, you're hoping to see next year? What do you want to see happen? I think this year was a huge shakeup for cEDH between just the raw number of cards that were viable on top of the huge push for like tournament play and how accessible this format's gotten. Big changes for cEDH this year, and I expect that to continue for the next few years. cEDH is in a great spot for me, and a lot of that is because of, you know, the big changes that have happened in 2023. Can't wait for Modern Horizons 3 to totally blow the doors off of this format. Consider supporting me over on Patreon. Consider subscribing. It really helps a lot. Hit that little like. And as always, go play cEDH. Have a good one.